Welcome, Michael.
Next up, welcome Moonlight director Barry Jenkins with The Atlantic's Ta-Nehisi Coates.
I was just looking at that headshot. I need a new headshot. That was like 8 years ago.
I actually
when
like
I was
I
young.
like my headshot.
You like your headshot?
Yeah, it's from like 3
You
weeks
got-
ago.
Yeah, well, yours is getting a little bit more run than mine these days.
There you go.
Listen, it is just. I mean, anytime obviously I get to do an event for the Atlantic, it is an honor and a true pleasure. But to be here with Barry, who is my favorite filmmaker, really my favorite
thank you,
filmmaker
man.
going right
Thank you,
now.
man.
It's just an incredible experience. Barry has a film out right now called Moonlight, which that's right. Just an incredible film, and I had the luxury of seeing it. And now I'm gonna toot my own horn. I had the luxury of seeing it a little bit early, just a little bit early, and.
Way early, bro.
Yeah, way early.
Way
So I just want to go on the record that I told him it was a masterpiece before everybody else did. I just want to let that be known. So I mean, just to have this conversation, because I don't just, Moonlight's a great film, but I admire Barry as a storyteller. His previous film, Medicine for Melancholy, which is also just absolutely incredible, and I urge you actually to watch that and then watch Moonlight, because you can see Barry's progression as a filmmaker and a kind of link between the two, even though they're two different films. So I guess just to start this off, Barry, will you just tell us, and I hate to throw this weight on you, but just tell us how you came to this film.
Yeah, so Moonlight began as a piece called In Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue, written by the playwright Terrell Alvin McCraney. Terrell was an undergrad acting fellow at DePaul University, and he was applying to Yale School of Drama as a writing student, a writing fellow. And he had to write 3 work samples. One of those samples became the Brother Size trilogy, which he wrote when he was 23 years old, the first draft of. The other piece was In Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue. And it kind of just sat there for about 10 years. In 2013, some mutual friends of ours, I didn't know Terrell at the time, and this guy I went to film school with at Florida State had gone to the same high school as Terrell, the Juilliard of Miami, the school called New World School of the Arts. And not a lot of people knew this about me. Terrell's always been much more public about his personal life and his work than I am. But both our moms went through this struggle with crack cocaine addiction growing up in the same neighborhood in Miami. And this guy, our mutual friend.
Did you guys know each other at all? Had you crossed paths?
Never.
Any people in common or anything like that?
I mean, we went to some of the same schools,
Right.
But
Is there an age difference?
I'm like 8 months older than him, which he's very proud to say.
Right. Not for long.
Yeah, I know,
Not
right?
for long.
And so this guy, he's like, oh, this isn't about you, but it's about you, and you should meet Terrell. And I did, and at the time, Terrell became a MacArthur genius. I like to give him hell and call him a genius every time I see him. And so he got really busy, and this beautiful thing happened where I began to describe to him how I saw the extension of the piece. And he got very busy, and yet, I had expressed to him what my vision of it was, and he said, you know what, I trust you, go forth. And that was how the whole thing really began in earnest.
There's a conversation that's going on right now in the arts, and particularly in literature, over this notion of cultural appropriation and who has the right to tell whose story. And I think you're straight, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you feel...
Which is a thing that should be asked, not assumed.
Yeah. But I'm actually more... Oh, you're talking about the question I asked. Yes,
Yeah,
it should be. I feel like we already had this conversation, but I'm just making sure everybody else, has a background. When you went into, the work, I mean, forget what the public reaction was going to be. How did you feel about having to, represent a gay character?
Yeah, I felt, I had ambivalence about it. I'll say when I first read the piece, I didn't immediately go, I want to make this film, know? Because I wasn't sure if I was the right person to make this film.
Right.
I think some stories need a first-person perspective. And despite the fact that there were so many things about this character, Chiron, I identify with, we were from the same neighborhood, we both grew up very poor, and both our moms went through this struggle with addiction. There was this other element of his identity that I didn't have a first-person perspective on. And we all know allies who tried to make movies about others without being others themselves, working purely from empathy, And there's a ceiling on that, you know. You can make a very admirable work, but if it doesn't have that first-person perspective, you know, it's not going to reach the full brunt of expression. And yet, in talking with Terrell, I realized that, you know, as an active ally, you know, you remember when Facebook let you put the rainbow flag over your profile? That's cute, you know, but you know, that's an example of passive empathy, you know, of being a passive ally. And I felt like, you know what, if I can preserve Terrell's voice and be very respectful of it, and I knew that had happened when Terrell said, literally, I trust you. I felt like then I could wed that with, you know, my role as an ally, you know, and take authorship over the piece. And once I did that, I didn't look back. I took the skepticism off the table. You know, I took the doubt off the table.
Would you have felt different if you had gotten that story and Terrell was straight?
Yeah. I mean, I'd have been like, I don't think either one of us, you know, is equipped to tell this story. Yeah. You know? I would have felt that way for sure. That's why I say Moonlight could not have originated with me. It had to originate with Terrell McCraney. You know? Otherwise, it would have changed to be a different film.
Right. We have a clip here that I think we want to show that illustrates just a little bit of what we've been talking about. So if we're ready, Barry, do you want to set up the clip?
I have no idea which clip we're showing.
Oh, okay, all right. So this is, I think I know. And if I'm wrong, I'll just be wrong. But I think I know. It's when they're in the car.
Okay.
What you looking at me like that for?
What, man? Come on, you just drove down here? Yeah. Like you was just on one, and you hit the highway.
Yeah.
So where you gonna stay tonight, man?
Love that clip. So it's funny because one of the things I love about that clip is purely aesthetic, but I don't think it's the kind of session that we're at.
No, go.
Well, I just love, you know, there was so much about this film that was very personal for me, both as a person, but also as a creative. You know, you talk about the representation of Black stories, but also Black bodies in cinema. And going back home to Miami, you know, my whole approach to Black bodies was, you know, I want to really lean into the richness of the skin. You know, you know, when you work on a film, the makeup person always has powder. You have to take the shine off. You have to dull the shine. And I'm like, no. This is a no powder show. It's all It was all oil and all mist.
You just let us be greasy out there.
No. I wanted us to catch the light, reflect the light. You know what I mean? Refract the light. And I love when you see Trevante's face in that scene. He's a very dark complected man. And his face just glows. It just glows. So I didn't realize what clip we were going to show, and I saw it, and it made me smile.
So this is Moonlight, you know, just for those who, it sounds like everybody's seen it, but just in case you haven't seen it, Moonlight is a movie that and Brad, you can correct me if I have this wrong anywhere. It occurs in 3 acts, and so we see the main character, Sharon, as about how old, 8, 9?
Yeah, he's like 10 years old in the first story, about 16 in the second.
And then, what, 20s or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not uniform the time that passes between chapters. So he could be 26, 27 in the third story.
All right, so it's not like 5 or something like that.
No. 3
different points in his life, you know, as a kid, as a teenager, and then as an adult, 3 different actors. And how did you deal with, and also, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of his friend.
Kevin.
And Kevin, 3 different actors for Kevin, who, you know, appears across it. How did you deal with the fact of having to have these 3 actors portray the same character, and yet you wanted some amount, like you wanted a thread, I'm assuming, some sort of narrative thread through the 3 in terms of like to make them recognizable, I guess. They hang out well together? Or?
Yeah, you know, the movie's inherently intersectional, and one of those sections is about how the world is projecting this idea of masculinity onto these young men in our community. I can speak to the community Terrell and I are from, in Miami, Florida, in Liberty City within Miami, Florida. And I think that those aggressions, we call them microaggressions, but I just think they're damn aggressive. They're just aggressions. And I think enough of this sort of like stimulus, this outward stimulus, eventually it takes effect and it starts to radically shape
Right.
who these young men are.
Right.
And so my thesis was, so much time passes between each chapter that when we reach the next iteration of the character, he's become a different person. So we will cast different people to play the same person. And in the physical embodiment of the character, you will now see how the world has reshaped this person. And what I love about the process was, in casting, normally you cast for chemistry. So there's always a Chiron and a Kevin in each story. There's a 10-year-old Chiron, a 10-year-old Kevin, teenager Chiron, teenager Kevin, then adult and an adult. Normally you chemistry read. We'll cast the teenagers together, the adults together, the kids together. And then I realized, no, that's not the way to go. There's this book by Walter Murch called In the Blink of an Eye. Walter Murch was Coppola's editor and sound designer on like his greatest films like Apocalypse Now, The Godfather. And Murch wrote this thesis, like this book called In the Blink of an Eye, that was basically about how the windows are the eyes into the soul. In film, the audience identifies with the character as they're looking into the eyes of the actor. So I thought if we find these actors with the same look in their eyes, the same soul, when you see Trevante Rhodes, as Chiron in the third story, you will still feel that little boy that we meet in the first story. And once we sort of linked in on that, everything, like the gates just opened, and all these wonderful actors started to present themselves.
There is I haven't been able to watch Moonlight again. It's a very, very emotional film for me. And one of the things I was telling Barry backstage was this idea of violence in the African American community, obviously in the LGBTQ community too also. And those things sort of come together in the film. And there are moments that just like if they did not happen to me, I remember them in my life. And you were talking about this change that sort of comes over people. And we see Chiron at the end of perhaps Act 2. In Act 3, he is a radically, radically different person. And I think one of the things that you really got in the film was the softness, that black boys are often not given credit for actually possessing. You know what I mean? We see these boys on the street and they're walking around, hard, and, we don't understand that there's actually, feelings and tenderness, in there. And he has this armor over him. When you see him in the third act, to cover all that, because it's almost as if he's recognized that, he can be hurt and he has to protect himself.
Yeah, it's almost like we detach the hardness that, again, I can only speak for the community Terrell and I are from.
Right.
It's almost like we detach the hardness that these young men take on without addressing the cause of it.
Right. Like we think it's natural or something. Exactly.
Yeah. And I don't think it comes from within. I think it comes from without. It's a response, a reaction to, one of my favorite scenes in the film, for those of you who've seen it, might be a mini spoiler for those of you who haven't. I'll say it's when Chiron strikes back at the end of the second chapter. Now, see, here's the thing. I've been exactly. See, I've been in audiences, and there are some rooms where everybody claps.
Yeah.
And there are some rooms where people go.
So I was one of those people.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, I didn't clap.
Well, it's because I don't think either reaction is false, but there's something gained. But there's also something lost.
That's exactly it. That's it.
Chiron loses a very big piece of himself when he does that. And it's what we're talking about, which is this hardness that is taken on, but at what cost?
And in the moment I saw that, like again, I actually get the applause. I get that. You know what I mean? He finally stands up and defends himself. But you understand that for certain people in certain situations, dude, like there's going to be a price that's exact. I mean, the minute I saw that, I saw, before even the cop car shows up, I saw prison, I saw now you're in the system.
It's going to break him. I remember you saying that.
Right. Now you're, you become a part. It's like you stand up to defend yourself, but you become part of something. And, the piece that you have in the film that leads up to that is how the system around him is failing to protect him. And then when he stands up and attempts to protect himself, he's punished for that.
Yeah.
He's punished for that. And, but how much of that comes out of your life? And I don't even mean specifically did that happen to you, but like that whole process of realizing that you have to, you have to take care of yourself.
The beauty of taking Terrell's piece and expanding it, extending it was there was all this stuff, from my personal background, from the world I grew up in, not that I could lean on, but that just fit, that organically just fit. I was telling the story backstage about, where I grew up. We would take the Metro bus home from school. And these two kids who were like not best friends, but they were friends, and it's a crowded bus, and the one dude is sitting down, the other dude's walking through the bus to the back, and he trips over his friend's foot. He stands up and he looks around. Everybody's seen it. No premeditation.
Right.
And that kid was never the same again. Neither one of them was ever the same again. And it had just been the two of them, it would have been like, oh, hey man, my bad. But because the whole world witnessed this transaction, now it's like, who am I in response to this? Or who does the world think I am in response to this? I can't let this cat make me fall on my face. Somebody has to be punished, because if not, the world is going to punish me. I think just taking little things like that, that we witness, and also too, I mentioned, wanting to be an ally. I saw that. I didn't do anything. I didn't say a damn thing. I kept my head down.
How old were you?
13, 14. Yeah, but still, man.
I mean, but you were a child.
True.
I mean, literally a child. Like, should it be the
I think the important thing is to carry these things with us, and when we have an opportunity.
Do you feel a sort of way about that, about not having said anything?
I mean, yeah, bro. I mean, clearly, I think it's still with me, and the only thing I can do is try to give it to the actors and put it into the work, and hopefully, if that guy, that man now sees this film, maybe he sees someone understands what was lost in that moment, because again, something's gained, but something's lost, and the thing that's gained ain't even worth much, when you think back.
Well, I mean, that's the ultimate. Like in the moment, it's something, but over the long term, the consequences that it has on your life. I just think like this process, of how someone in a certain situation could take on, an armor, could take on a culture, I would say. In fact, a culture, in order to protect themselves and have the outside world perceive them, as not quite human. And I just think you just was able to peel back the layers and show how that happens.
Well, and I'm glad we showed the clip of Trevante Rhodes, because Trevante is a guy who came in to audition actually for a different part. And he came in, and if you've seen the film, he's got all these muscles. Talk about a suit of armor. He literally, he is like pictorially, he's this idea of masculinity run amok. I mean, that guy, he's a world class athlete, so he's not putting on airs. He's like, that's actually how his body is. But he came in to read, and I judged him. I was like, oh no, you can't be this character. I don't see the sensitivity in you, But then I went, but you know what? Let's do an audition, And he started reading, and over the course of him performing, he radically reshaped my idea of what was possible with the character. That you could see a man who looks like this, and still feel, that thing that you can never really get rid of, that child, that inner being in his soul. And there were beautiful things like that happened in the process of making the film that Trevante in particular totally embodied.
Right. Here's what we're gonna do, because I talked to Barry all day. We'll open some beers and
clearly.
Keep this going.
I mean, I have to remind myself to look out there every now and then. I apologize.
I see the clock counting down, so I'm gonna make sure we get to our questions. My basic rule about this is really, really, really simple. Let's just make sure we ask a question, because and you know what I mean. It's because we want to get to as many as we can. That's the only reason. We don't hate you and your question. So, do we want to start right here?
Yes, I really enjoyed the film, and I'd like to ask you about the development of the drug hustler early on in the film. And the reason is that so often that showed a different side of the kind of folks we think of as dealers, as someone who was much more sensitive and caring. So, how did you come about the development of that character?
Yeah, so this character Juan, played by Mahershala Ali, we're in D.C., played by Remy Danton. So that character was the whole genesis for the project. Terrell McCraney actually had a friendship, a paternal relationship with a local drug dealer growing up in Miami. This guy whose name was Blue actually took Terrell under his wings and protected him, from the bullies in the neighborhood, and taught him how to swim, taught him how to ride a bike. So people always say, oh, it's great how the movie defies stereotypes. And I'm like, well, stereotypes don't come from within. Juan is a character who's based on this person who's very instrumental to Terrell's life. So creating him in this way, it was organic, And I'll give Mahershala credit, because if you've seen the film, that character is only in it, for a very defined amount of time, and yet his presence carries through. And I think his presence carries through because I guess people are so shocked to see, a drug dealer, who is a human being, who has a home and has a woman that he loves and who can take care of someone else's child.
Where we? Am I going over here? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terence Laney. I'm from the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs here in Washington, D.C. And my question is about Chiron's stunted sexuality that you find out at the end. And I want to know what was the sort of purpose of making him so sexually immature.
You're talking about in the third chapter, right? So again, I think the character has taken on this sort of suit of arms in a certain way between chapter 2 and chapter 3. And I think, I don't know about a stunted sexuality. I think he's become asexual because this attachment to any version of sexuality has been so painful to him. The way I pictured to Trevante was, here's a man who has decided he is unworthy of love. You know, part of that had to do with his sexuality, part of it had to do with his relationship to his mother. And so I think, you know, the movie, I'm glad we showed that clip too, because the movie's working very fast. You know, we're covering a lot of ground until, I assume you've seen it, you know, until we get to the diner and that doorbell rings. Now we're in real time, you know, and we've seen this reconciliation with his mom. And now I think very slowly, the character's coming out of that asexuality, out of that stunted sort of a bit of sexual growth. And now we're seeing with Andre Holland creating the space that he's going to get to a point where that is not the case. But to me, it was rooted more, and this comes from personal experience, of feeling like he was unworthy of love. And that was tied to his familial relationship, but also to his very tragic encounter with the other character.
Hi, again, the movie was fantastic. I would be more interested, of course, coming off the success of this, what type of future projects you may have in mind.
Right now, I'm working on this book by Colson Whitehead called The Underground Railroad. I'm turning that into a limited series, not a feature film. And then I adapted a book by James Baldwin that I'm working on now, also as a feature. And then a few other things, you know. I hope to work with Mr. Coates someday, if I can be so fortunate.
After this, I told him after this, man, you and me, maybe back in the medicine for melancholy days. After this, brother, you too rich for my blood, man. Too big.
But you know, the one thing I will say is,
man.
I went 8 years between making films before, and I hope that's never the case again. So hopefully, I'll have something for you to see real soon. Yeah.
Barry, can I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the span of time, did that have anything to do with, I have no other way to ask it, how good Moonlight actually was?
You know, probably. You know, that's what I've been saying. You know, I worked on two things that I cared a lot about in the first 5 years between medicine and this, and those things didn't work. I think because I either wasn't good enough or my core wasn't totally aligned with their core. But once this thing came on my desk, and this is, of those things, the least conventional, the least orthodox, like the most difficult as far as, you know, like commercial aspects, marketability goes. But this thing is like, it manifested itself. People would read the script and they would go, this is amazing. We don't want to tell you anything about how to do it. We just want to enable you to do it, you know? So when Plan B and A24 came on, they gave notes, but they never said, you know, take your voice and frame it this way, you know? Do it this way and we can market it that way. It was always about, you know, do the best job you can, make the film for an audience of two, you know, myself and Terrell, you know, and once we have the film, you know, we will figure out what the market is. And, you know, I think it's a testament to our partners that the film is done, you know, given the modesty of its budget, you know, so well at the box office so far. And I tip my hat to them because it was always about the voice driving, you know, what the product was and not the other way around.
I think we got at least time for one more right here.
In another interview that you did, it was at the African American Museum. I'm sorry, I should stand
Yes.
up, right?
Okay.
Sorry. I think it was at the museum or for the PBS NewsHour. You said you were talking with the playwright, and then you said, "I don't think I could have made this film 5 years ago." I don't know if this rings any bells for you, so I apologize. But if it does ring a bell, can you explain that a little bit more? And was it more about the culture we're living in, or was it just something personally as a filmmaker you weren't ready to make the film? You weren't.
It's always about me, not about the culture we're living in. And it wasn't. No, if I say I'm not ready for something, it was definitely about me. And it wasn't about my filmmaking voice or anything like that. I just think, again, earlier I said, you know, I felt this had to come from a first-person perspective. And then I had to become, I think, a bigger man, a better man, to feel comfortable dealing with these issues, you know, to feel comfortable taking authorship of the piece and to be respectful enough of Terrell's voice, you know, to blend it, you know, with mine. And 5 years ago, you know, I was a much younger man. I don't think I could have done that. I don't think I was capable of doing it with the same sensitivity and tenderness that we did on the piece, you know, a year ago. So yeah, it was just about me and not about any other element.
Thank you guys so much. All three of you in here who have not seen Moonlight, go see it. Thanks so much.